Hello, are we starting? Hello and welcome back to the Applique Elementz studio. Here we are in the beginning of March and I've got on my green St. Patrick's Day colors and we're about to get started on block 4 of the Dog Park versus Alley Cat Applique challenge here. I have my two blocks set up here, and at the beginning of the series I also pre-cut my fabric for the background for each of the blocks. So I'm waiting to see if I make a mistake and put the wrong species on the wrong background. Haven't so far. So I'm going to go ahead and get my fabrics ironed again to make sure that they're perfectly crisp. I'm going to take out my paper pattern and I'm going to iron those because I want no distortion when I'm laying my applique pieces in. And then I'm also going to lay out all of the pre-cut pieces of fabric that already have the Seam 2 on the backing, just to make sure that I have all my components for each one and that they're laid out so it's easier for me to put them in place. So I'm going to get those things done and we'll be back, and well, you won't even know the difference. It'll be like beep. See, we're back already. What I have is all of my pieces laid out. I have my instructions still here in the package if I were to need those as a reference. I have the cover of my pattern here that I could use as a color reference for matching the components up if I get confused by a shape or its position. I have all of my components laid out in an approximate location to where they're going to go. I have my pattern to the side that I've already ironed, and I just like to iron it to get some of the creases out to make sure I have the placement absolutely correct. And I also pulled aside my components that are going to overlap a couple blocks after they get assembled. So I'm going to take these and put these back into the package for saving for when that time comes. So I'm going to go ahead and slide my pattern under and then get my light box on. I've also gone ahead and ironed my background fabric again, just to make sure that the background fabric is exactly as I need it and crisp, so there's no wrinkles in it. So I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see. And as we've said before, all of the components have a paper backing on it because these are all laser cut and pre-fused with the Seam 2. In most cases you'll find that the paper peels off very easily. And this component just goes back behind the head. This is the neck. And so I'm just going to go ahead and assemble this as the pieces are laid out. If you have dotted lines on the pattern, that indicates that something is back behind, so that you can still get your placement. I'm going to put the muzzle on now. And again, these are coming off so easily, I really don't have to do anything special to get off the pieces. But if I was having problems with getting that off, you can always score the back of the paper with a seam ripper or a needle, and that gives you something to grab onto in the middle of the paper. It's also sometimes a good idea to do that if you have a really crisp edge like a circle and you don't want to worry about fraying that at all. And now we have some of the tiger striping on this particular breed of cat. When you have compound layers, sometimes it's good to lift up the fabric just to get those placements in the right spot. Sometimes I'll also take the pattern out from the back and I'll lay it on the top so I can see where the pieces go as well. It's just another way of making sure that your pieces are where you want them to be. One thing that I also wanted to mention on this particular month is that we have a lot of little black dots this month. We have the little black dots that are the freckles on the muzzle, and we also have black dots for the eyes, and we also have black dots for the antenna of the dragonfly. So that's another reason why I really like to separate out all these pieces to make sure that we have them in the right place. Because I had put the larger dots for my dragonfly's antenna when in fact they were supposed to be for the eyes, the pupils of the cat eye. And you want to find those types of mistakes before you fuse. And again, the other nice thing about the Steam-A-Seam 2, it's tacky to the touch, but it still allows you to lift up and make corrections if you need to, up until the point that you fuse it with the iron. I always enjoy watching just how easily these units go together and how much character each of them have. They have so much personality. I've seen almost each of these type of cats in my own neighborhood. Fortunately, I can just see through the black head back to the pattern to see where the eyes go. If not, I would have had to lift the pattern up. These little black dots always give me the most trouble because they're so small and because they're a different material. And it's funny to me, just the slightest variation in how you put the eyeballs in and the pupils, what a difference it makes in the expression of the animal. And you can make those just as kooky as you want to. That one came off pretty good. Also, because this black material is a little bit thicker, it's almost like an ultra suede. It takes a little bit longer for the heat to get through that when we're fusing this product down. So you want to make sure that you really give that time. I also like to make sure when I'm finished to apply heat from both the front and the back of the block whenever that's possible. I know sometimes if you're fusing on a hard surface like glass or wood or metal, that wouldn't be possible to fuse it from both sides. But when we're doing fabric, I would certainly advise doing that. I would also say, while I'm putting these little whiskers on, that these are available many of our applique are available as individual blocks. They're available as a whole kit. They are available, many of them, as just a paper pattern that you could download if you were a traditional needle turn applique and you wanted to use your own fabric. And many of them are also available as a SVG file, which simply what stands for scalable vector graphic, but it's the file format that is used for like a Silhouette, Cameo, or a Brothers scan and cut machine, so that you could fuse your own fabric and cut it exactly with one of the cutting machines. So there's a wide variety of ways that you could purchase this design. Now, where does this whisker go? Way down here. Now, the last thing I have are the little freckles. I'll see if I can't get those on without fumbling too much. Excuse me. I almost started daydreaming there for a minute. I was so into my little freckles that I started to wander off. And this is my last one. Just like that, we've got the Alley Cat block finished for month 4. I still have to fuse it, but I'm going to go ahead and get my pressing cloth on top. I'll spritz it with water, and I'll show you that when we get to that step. So I'm going to set this aside and get my dog block set up. Well, we're back. As you can see, I've ironed my pattern and I've ironed my background fabric. I try and keep the orientation of my background fabric the same, since it's slightly readable material. See if I can get the block sort of on there right. And I've got all of my components laid out as they will go on the block. So I think I'm going to start with the part of the flower that is not overlapping the block, which is just the stem and a couple of the leaves. The actual flower I'm going to wait until the block is completed. But I want to get this first part down because it is going underneath the mouth. And clearly I had that on backwards. See how much better it goes when I do it the right way? I need to get the neck on, and I'm going to have to lift up the little edge of the flower because that goes underneath. Then I have the tongue. I've also kind of laid out these pieces in the order in which they're going to get laid down so that I don't have as much lifting up to do. Not that it makes a big difference, because as I've said, you can lift up these pieces. They'll stay in place just with the tackiness of the Steam-A-Seam 2, but they're not permanently down until after we fuse it. And that's what I think is one of the great things about the Steam-A-Seam 2. It gives you some chance to play without being committed to something until you make sure it's all right. Now that I have my head on, I can go ahead and finish out the ears. I'm going to lift that up a little bit. Looks like I'm too high. With the light on, it's kind of hard to see the color of this dark purple accent of the inner ear, but once we get the light off, then that'll become more visible. And I'm going to put as many of these flower components on as I can while I have them, just so I don't have to worry about them getting lost. But the actual flower pieces, which will be 3 remaining pieces, I'll have to save those until after we assemble the blocks together. And if for some reason you were only doing one of these blocks, you could simply move the flower over so that it fit more in line with the project that you were doing. Because we are doing a whole quilt here, that doesn't mean that you will. You could be putting this on a bag, a backpack, a jacket, anything that you wanted. I like the dogs because they're so much simpler, they go together so much faster. That's why I always save it to the second. And I can't, it was almost a little hard to make out where that went. So I've got my iron heated up, and this is the last component from what I'm going to actually be putting on this block. But I just wanted to show you a little bit some of the different expressions you can get from these dogs just by moving the location of the eyes of where you put them. You can kind of make him cross-eyed. You could have him daydreaming, looking off to the direction. You could have him looking over at the flower that he's bringing to his faithful master. So you could put these wherever you wanted and give different expressions to your animal. And this particular one reminds me of one of Jamie Wallen's animals, which we all know how much he loves those, and they're so fun to play with. So I'm going to go ahead and get the light box out of the way. We don't need that anymore. And I'm going to get my pressing cloth out. We're going to get those set up to sew. And I have my pressing cloth out. In this case, I have it both behind and I'm going to put it on top of the block. It's not really necessary for it to be behind it, but mine is big enough to do that, and it just helps keep it out of the way. And I don't usually put water in my iron so that it won't leak. So I'm going to add my steam via a moisture spritz bottle. So I'm just going to go ahead and give both of those a nice little spritz, and I'm going to lay my pressing cloth on top of it. I also just going to give it a real quick check to make sure that everything is where I want it, that nothing has slipped out of position while I was moving it around, and then I'm just going to lay it down. The nice thing about the pressing cloth is it allows the heat to penetrate. It protects the iron from any fusible web that might migrate out from behind the piece. But also, I sometimes am lazy and I slide the iron rather than pick it up and move it. And if you do that with the fusible, sometimes you can crinkle up the edge and then permanently fuse it in place, and then you have a crinkled edge. So I like to use the pressing cloth because it keeps the pressure on the pieces without letting them move from side to side. And I will just give this, some time for the heat to penetrate and activate the Steam-A-Seam 2. As I said earlier, what I'll do when I'm finished with the ironing of each piece, I will go back and flip the block over, and I'm going to iron it from the back. That's so those compound pieces where there's a layer of the head, the large eye, the pupil, gives a chance for the fusible to melt in all three of those locations, on the backing fabric, on the head, and on the eye itself, so that we have good adhesion and that the fusible is then permanent. Steam-A-Seam 2 does require moisture. That's why they call it Steam-A-Seam 2. So you do have to have a moisture component in some fashion. If you were fusing this onto something that you couldn't iron, you could use the heat of a blow dryer, but again, you want to use a spritz bottle. And then you could use something like a pressing cloth or a tea towel to apply pressure to the item after you've applied the heat. And the blow dryer could also fuse the material. Now, just so I don't bore you to death, I'm not going to do this as long as I might do it. But again, I'm going to flip this over, apply a little bit of moisture with my spritz bottle, and then I'm going to go ahead and iron it from the back. This time I'm not going to put the pressing cloth over because there really is no chance of me crinkling up one of the edges from the back. It also allows more heat to penetrate through all of the compound layers. And I can also keep an eye on the fabric itself. And when I see that the fabric is dried from the moisture I've sprayed on it, I know that we've gotten a pretty good amount of heat through the cotton. We have fused these items onto burlap, silk, canvas, metal, glass, wood. We've tried all different kinds of materials to fuse them onto, and it works really well on everything, as long as you can apply some heat to it. If the item is so delicate that you couldn't apply any heat, then it's probably not a good candidate for this, but just about everything that I have tried has worked. We have used it on lampshades at the show, and all different kinds of things. So you can see just how quickly and beautifully those fused out. So I want to thank you for joining us yet again today. I want to thank Urban Elements for the opportunity of letting me present these free videos to you, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. And hopefully we have no sound issues today, because I changed the battery. You all have a good afternoon, and we'll look for you soon. Wow, look how good those came out. I think the dog's my favorite. Go Team Dog Park.